Mention Adam Smith today, and you usually get a single, stark image: the stoic father of economics, the patron saint of the free market, who taught us that rational greed drives the world. But the actual man behind the theory was a comically absent-minded bachelor. He would regularly talk to himself in public. Once, while deep in a conversation about free trade, he walked straight into a huge factory tanning pit and had to be hauled out. His most legendary detour happened one morning when he stepped out of his house in his nightgown, lost in thought, and wandered 15 miles out of town before local church bells snapped him back to reality. These eccentricities hide an unresolved intellectual contradiction tucked deep inside his life's work. In 1759, Smith published a book arguing that human beings are driven by a natural desire for mutual sympathy. 17 years later, he published his magnum opus, arguing that humans are actually driven by self-interest. These two positions sparked a fierce academic debate in the 19th century, known as das Adam Smith problem, a search to understand how the same philosopher could hold such opposing views on human nature. To figure out which is the real Adam Smith, we have to look at the life that forged two completely opposing masterpieces. Smith's early life was highly unconventional. He was abducted by Romani at age 3, eventually rescued, and sent to study at the University of Glasgow. He later won a scholarship to Oxford, but found the environment so intellectually stifling he had to read David Hume's philosophy in secret to avoid being punished. He left Oxford early, returning to Scotland to become a university professor. That academic environment produced his first great contribution, a 1759 book called The Theory of Moral Sentiments. In it, he defines the impartial spectator. Our conscience isn't innate, but formed by imagining how a neutral observer judges our behavior. This imagined feedback pushes us to align our actions with others. Over time, these interactions develop the moral habits that govern society. In this stage of his career, Smith defined humanity as a deeply social, empathetic species that actively seeks out the approval of others. Then, his path changed. Smith left his comfortable professorship to accept a lucrative job as a traveling tutor for a young British duke. They toured Europe, where Smith met intellectual giants like the French philosopher Voltaire. He also met the French physiocrats, a group of thinkers who exposed him to the deep flaws in mercantilism. Smith saw firsthand how the prevailing policies of hoarding national wealth and heavily restricting imports were actually damaging economies. Eventually, the tour settled in Toulouse, France. Smith found the town intensely boring and wrote a letter to David Hume mentioning he had begun writing a new book simply to pass the time. That European trip pulled his attention away from the internal moral compass of the individual, redirecting it toward the external, mechanical gears of national wealth. He eventually returned to his hometown of Kirkcaldy in Scotland. As we can see on the title page of this 1776 first edition, those notes from France evolved into an inquiry into the nature and causes of the wealth of nations. This text introduced the division of labor. Smith explained that breaking down production into specialized, repeatable tasks allows for a level of output that single artisans simply could not reach. He also outlined the concept of the invisible hand. This is the observation that when individuals pursue their own rational self-interest in a market, their competition unintentionally benefits the entire economy. Smith designed the wealth of nations as a systemic observation of how competition naturally drives innovation, lowers prices, and lifts populations out of poverty. So how does the empathy-focused moralist from 1759 coexist with the self-interest-focused economist from 1776? This brings us back to das Adam Smith problem. Modern scholars have arrived at a consensus. Smith never changed his mind. The two books are complementary halves of a single psychological system. The two concepts divide human life based on proximity. The theory of moral sentiments governs the private sphere of friends, family, and neighbors. In that close circle, our natural sympathy acts as the restraint on our self-interest. The wealth of nations governs the public sphere of strangers, merchants, and international trade. Because we lack personal sympathy with a faceless market, economic competition steps in to act as the restraint on our self-interest. When you read the two texts together, you find a system where moral philosophy and economic theory work in tandem. He advocated for what he called the obvious and simple system of natural liberty. In this system, free markets are essential to generate wealth, but they only function properly when strictly underpinned by justice and moral propriety. True societal wealth requires both the competitive drive of the market and the moral framework of the impartial spectator. Today, people often dismiss economics as a dismal science of cold numbers and strict efficiency. Smith viewed political economy as a noble pursuit, meant to enrich both the people and the sovereign. Adam Smith's ultimate legacy is the argument that economics is rooted in human nature, how we interact, how we empathize, and how we trade our way to a better world.